This is the DallasCowboys.com Draft Show. Your war room for insider news and draft analysis from deep within the confines of Cowboys headquarters at the Star in Frisco.
The Dallas Cowboys select T.D. Lamb, wide receiver.
And now, your hosts, Dane Brugler, Jeff Kavanaugh, Kevin Turner, and Kyle Yeomans.
There are 111 days until the NFL draft in Cleveland, Ohio, April 29, 2021, but 0 days to wait for the DallasCowboys.com draft show as we are back second time this week, and it's twice the draft show all the way through until the NFL draft. Even some weeks we may have some more draft show for you, but it's double dipping from here on out due to the Cowboys losing their chances at a playoff berth. But glad to be joined, as always, by Dane Brugler, Kevin Turner, and then, hey, how about this? We've got David Hellman back on the show after missing on Tuesday. That's the glory of this kind of week, Hellman, and kind of this scenario with what Derek has built with the draft show, because we had Jeff Kavanaugh fill in on Tuesday, came in, did a great job with Bucky and Brian, and then now you get to come in and substitute for a day. So the talent is always there, and everyone's going to get a voice whenever it comes to these draft prospects.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic because when we talked about this, gigantic lineup, I was a little bit confused about how it was going to work, and here we are, like 1 week into the offseason. I'm like, oh yeah, like this is pretty great. We can mix and match as we need to because of everybody's schedules. So it's cool to see y'all instead of Brian's old face for a change.
No, it's great. For the most part, we all get along. So that's, for the most part, we all kind of, for the most part.
For the most part. Who are you referring to here, KT?
I was saying, so some of us could disagree on sometimes you disagree on if you want to win games or not.
Oh, boy.
So, but that's over, and we will never talk about it again.
We hope.
Because they will never miss the playoffs again after this year's draft.
I like your attitude.
We're going to fix the draft that much. We're going to fix this team that much. But, I mean, I like your way of thinking, and we're going to kind of get into maybe some second, third-round guys today. We're going to talk about the national championship game, of course, coming up, and Heisman winner Devontae Smith, first wide receiver to win the Heisman since 1991. But I want to kind of go into how to fix this Cowboys team, KT. I mean, you're kind of looking ahead a little bit. I mean, that loss to the Giants secured that number 10 overall pick, but it also showed a lot of the holes. It showed a lot of the issues with this Cowboys team, specifically on the defensive side of the football, and it kind of compounded what was the 2020 season into one game. But whenever you look at the first-round talent, we've kind of talked about the Farleys and the Surtains and all these different players that could potentially go in the first round. But if you look into day two, where is the majority of the talent? Is it at defensive tackle? Is it at linebacker? Where are we going to find somebody that's going to fix this defense, KT, that the Cowboys need desperately?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a guy who's pretty big on this secondary needs to be rebuilt. And the rebuild process might have already happened with Trevon Diggs coming in, and you were lucky to get him at 51 last year. At least we felt he was, or I felt they were lucky to get him at 51. You mentioned DT and linebacker, and those are areas that I do want them to address, and I think they could use another defensive end as well. And I would have liked to have seen some more Bradley Anai, on the active list on game day. But I am liking what you might have at cornerback there. If you look at the Cowboys are picking at 44. I mean, I don't think it's crazy to think that you could be double up at cornerback if you needed to. You already have Anthony Brown, who I think is a solid player. But, I think the depth, you're gonna hit a spot where you feel like you're kind of dry. But is Eric Stokes from Georgia there at 44? Is Tyson Campbell from Georgia there at 44? Do you like them? There's some questions they're going to come up. How far do you feel like you need a slot guy and maybe Elijah Molden from Washington, who, to me, has kind of a defensive Cole Beasley type junkyard dog mentality. Greg Newsome from Northwestern is a really good player. If you want to double up at cornerback, I think you could do that. We've seen this team do that in the 2017 draft, and I think we look back on and go, what a great draft. But I think that's a possibility. And I'm more excited about taking 2 cornerbacks, I think, than I would be, taking a linebacker in round 2.
Dane, what do you think about some of the names that KT just threw out there, but also the fact that thinking about double dipping is not something new. They even did it last year at corner with Reggie Robinson. I know they moved him to safety, but then you had Diggs in the second. But double dipping in days 1 and 2 is kind of what KT's alluding to here. Is that a possibility for the Cowboys with the talent that's on the table?
Oh, absolutely. And the Cowboys have shown their hand in the past few years that, hey, I think they feel pretty good about finding corners on day 2 of the draft with the returns with Wouzier, with obviously Trevon Diggs, what he did as a rookie. I came out with my all-rookie team on The Athletic this week, and Trevon Diggs was my number 1 corner. Despite missing a few games, he was. I thought, even though, and there were some rough patches there, but he was the most consistent from start to finish. And so I think if you're the Cowboys, you feel pretty good about your chances of finding a corner, whether that's and KT set it up nicely with a lot of those names. I think maybe like a Tyson Campbell, I think there's a good chance he goes 1 because the traits are just so remarkable. But if you can find a guy like an Asante Samuel, because he's going to get dinged because of the size, but just like his dad, the ball skills, the instincts, the reaction quickness, he makes plays. And so if you're able to get an Asante Samuel in the second round, that's a heck of a find. Another name I would throw out there, Ifatu Melifonwu from Syracuse, another guy. I know KT likes him too. All the traits are there. I mean, if you want traits, he's got him. 6'3", 215 pounds. He's twitchy. He moves well. I think he could play press. He could play zone. Melifonwu's kind of a name that isn't talked about a whole lot, but I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up somewhere on day 2.
Sorry, Dane, you broke my heart a little bit there because like we bring up Tyson Campbell. This is we do this every year where I'm like, oh, okay, you're telling me Tyson Campbell might be in play at 44, like this 6'1" big cornerback from the SEC, like sign me the hell up, and then you're like, no, yeah, he's physically rare enough that he might not be available for you.
Well, and I mean, I don't know. Did any of us think Trevon Diggs was going to fall to 51? So you never say never, but I think Campbell's got a better chance to be, like an AJ Terrell, a guy that there's some. The tape's not perfect. I mean, I wish he would play just a little more loose with his play style. But the traits you just can't coach. He's born with a lot of those, and so I think that there's a better chance he's going to end up somewhere in the first round. But yeah, you just never know. Guys with those types of traits, you bet on, and if he were to fall to the second round, you jump all over that.
Just as a sorry, Kyle, go ahead. No, just as a general statement. I like hearing this because, and obviously things are going to change. Free agency is going to happen, but it's hard to ignore cornerback as this team's biggest trouble spot right now just because they don't have any. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen to Cheeto or Jordan Lewis. Reggie Robinson, first of all, was moved to safety, and second of all, didn't play. So you don't even know what you have in him. And so they need bodies. And so it's at least encouraging to think that they can potentially double up or find guys with that second pick if they don't get one in the top 10 or even if they do. I have a feeling that's going to change, but it's still nice to know.
Well, if they're in the second round or day 2 looking at all these corners, and there are some good names there, I mean, outside of the Campbells and the Wades, I mean, there's the guys like the Eric Stokes and the Asante Samuel Jr. who may not be there in the second round, but are at least second-round conversation guys. Would that deter this team from potentially taking a corner like a Surtain or a Farley in the top 10? I mean, because I know we're talking about double dipping here, and if that's a possibility, sure, it's a possibility. But knowing that there's guys on the back end, does it make you feel better up in that first round, Dane? Because I know the defensive tackle talent isn't there for a top 10 pick. And same thing with maybe a linebacker outside of Micah Parsons. But does it deter a team away if you're wanting to go corner, the fact that there might be some later on?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting philosophical approach that I think there's going to be differing opinions on, because there's some logic to what you're saying. If a position is stronger on day 2, then why not go with a position that's still something that you need, and because there's a better chance, just odds better odds, there's going to be a player at that other position later on. So it makes sense. But I also think that with every round that goes, lowers your chances of hitting. And so I think it's important in the first round to hit. And that means drafting the best player on your board. It's that gets into the whole best player available conversation and all that. I just think when you have a top 10 pick, you need to draft who's going to make the biggest impact on your roster. And that might be a corner, that might be a tackle. It might be, if we think about it, okay, let's say 4 quarterbacks do end up going top 10, which would only be the second time since 1960 it's ever happened, but it's possible. That would mean you're getting this, theoretically, the 6th best non-quarterback in this draft. That's pretty good. I mean, you feel pretty good about that. And so I think you have to, go after the best player. That might be a Caleb Farr. That might be Patrick Surtain. But if you think those guys are on the same tier as, say, a linebacker or a pass rusher, then maybe you do go with one of those other positions and make sure you get your corner later. I will say this, though. I think pass rusher is also a very strong position. We don't have that top 10 guy that locked top 10 guy this year, but in the mid-first round, in the second round, third round, there are some intriguing pass rushers in this class.
Yeah, and that's another thing about this roster. I think Randy Gregory has earned his starting job next year, but you just can't lock that in. And kind of the way I would think about this, if I was working in an NFL front office, and God knows I'm not, but if I was, I'm more in the boat of let's just take the best player we can and let's fill out this roster. But if I'm a team that I feel like I have a top 10 offense and I feel like I have a top 10 defense, that's where I'm comfortable road mapping the draft, which is what the Cowboys have shown that they do a lot. And 2017 is the best example where they said, we are taking an edge player in the first round, ended up taking Taco. And then Cheeto and Jordan Lewis, we knew because they knew the depth of the draft that they were going to attack the secondary on day 2. And I just don't know if that philosophy works as well when you've hit rock bottom like they did defensively this year. I think you just got to load up with the best players you can pick. And I think if you spend too much time thinking about what might be there on day 2, then you could lose out on something on day 1. And I would say the same thing about day 3. Well, if I'm thinking too much about what might be there in round 4, you might miss something, that's right underneath you right there on day 2. That's just my philosophy.
I want to bring it back to kind of what Kyle led this off with. And Dane, I love to put you on the spot. I'm in mid-January, and I'm going to ask you this, but this is the impression that I get just from I'm kind of getting knee deep into this draft class now. Cornerback certainly seems like, and all right, for the purposes of this, we're talking about defense. Forget about Kyle Pitts. Forget about the offensive tackles. We're just talking defense. Cornerback certainly seems like one of a few positions where you have multiple guys that you feel good about in that top 10 spot. It doesn't seem like there's a defensive tackle that you would want to pick there. Micah Parsons, maybe the Notre Dame guy who, apologies, I'm blanking, Owusu-Koramoah.
Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's 3. I don't get the impression that there's a safety that you would feel good about drafting in that round. So cornerback and linebacker and maybe edge. Although even edge, is there a guy that you would stand on the table for all the way up at 10?
No.
I think maybe if they stick with a 3-4, Azeez Ojulari is so intriguing to me. I think he's better than Cle'Veon Chason last year. I think he's a better prospect. So that would be a guy that, would I stand on the table for him at 10? Maybe not necessarily, that emphatically, but I would definitely consider him. He has to be in the conversation. One more name I think needs to be in there is Zaven Collins from Tulsa.
Yes. I was going to ask about him later in the show. I really like what he brings to the table.
And I know the Cowboys like him. I know they like him in the first round. I don't know if they like him top 10. I don't know if they would consider him as high as 10. but I know that they do really like him, and so that's a name I think we need to keep on the radar as a guy that could potentially be that choice. Talking about in the first round.
Dane, why was he so far off the radar that he's just now starting to kind of get some pub and get some recognition? Because I feel like early on, I never heard his name. I mean, whenever we were talking about some of these defensive prospects, but then all of a sudden he's popped up. And I mean, of course, I watched his tape yesterday for the first time just because I was saying, who's this Zaven Collins guy people keep asking about? Well, I really liked what he brought, but why did it take so long for everybody to notice?
Well, I mean, playing at Tulsa is part of it, but he's a guy that back in October was getting first round love from around guys around the league. So it's just more of people on the outside kind of catching up. But he's 6'3", 260. He moves so well for a guy that size. And I think he might be a better fit for a 3-4 because of just the versatility that he brings as a pass rusher. He could be a natural Sam, but there's just so much to like about him as a versatile linebacker that can stay on the field and just give you a lot. So, playing at Tulsa is part of it, but man, if you want a guy with production, and he certainly had that. He provided impact play, it seems like, every single week, whether it was a pick six or a big tackle. He's covering on the outside. Zaven Collins is a guy that a lot of teams like, and when you really boil it down and you start stacking these players on a board, you realize, okay, I like Zaven Collins more than this guy. Okay, yeah, take Zaven Collins over him. And all of a sudden, you realize he's closer to 10 than maybe we thought a couple months ago.
When they were watching Reggie Robinson last year, they were going, "Wait, who's that guy?"
Yeah.
Former
high school quarterback. Okay, playing linebacker. Okay, moves like that. Okay.
Is there a chance he falls to 40s? Is there a chance he falls to the 40s?
No, he's top 20.
I'd be very surprised. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I think he's a guy that could be in the mix in the top 15. So it would be a surprise, but you never know.
Can we stay on Koromoa for a minute because we don't talk about him a lot? I think one frustrating thing, you never want to rush these types of decisions, but I want decisions made about this defense immediately. Who is the DC? Are we changing the scheme?
Yeah.
What are we doing? Honestly, and I don't want to be like unfair, but you need to make a decision on Jalen Smith soon.
Yep.
Soon. Are you going to post June 1 cut him and you have a $9 million cap hit spread out over 4 years? And that's around that area. Mm-hmm. Are you going to post June 1 cut him? Are you bringing him back? I think you need to know. And Jermaine Owusu-Koramoah from Notre Dame is the type of guy who I don't think is going to suit every scheme. And I think some teams are going to go, I think I want to play him like maybe Arizona utilizes, Buda Baker. And there are going to be some teams who say, you know what, he's my weak side linebacker. You're going to need to know those types of things when we come to evaluating these players and how seriously you're going to take those guys. Because I love Koromoa's tape, and you sit here and go, I don't know if this team would seriously take him or not. But I think he's a guy who needs to be considered as a top 15 pick in this draft.
That is a wonderful point, KT. And going back all the years that we did this show when Rod Marinelli was the DC, I used to always say, don't talk to me about these Swiss Army knife players because that's not what Rod Marinelli does. Rod Marinelli wants to put pegs into holes and you're my end, you're my end, you're my safety. You didn't see those versatile guys who move all over the defense playing here. And obviously Rod's gone, but I don't feel like I have any better grasp of what Mike Nolan would do with that type of player. I couldn't tell you which maybe that's an embarrassing thing to admit. I don't know what Mike Nolan does or what he wants to do. I don't have a good idea of what that defense.
What's the
identity of that defense? I don't know, and we also don't even know if Mike Nolan's going to be the DC by the time they pick. So, yeah, it would be very nice to have some clarity about what their mission statement is for this defense, which hopefully we'll get that eventually.
Yeah, consistency leads to identity, and there was no consistency. There was zero consistency throughout the season, and so we're all sitting here, like you said, Dave, with our hands up in the air, what are we doing? Where are we going from here? Because we don't know what the consistency is from a personnel standpoint. What are we doing in the cornerback spot? What are we doing from linebackers? I mean, KT, you brought up a fantastic point because we don't even know what scheme we're going to run. We don't know if it's going to be a 3-4 or 4-3. How are we going to pick efficiently if we don't know what that's going to be?
You know what I think is important to remember? The highest paid player in Dallas Cowboys franchise history is Demarcus Lawrence. Demarcus Lawrence is probably suited to be a 4-3. Should we build it around him? I don't know how much longer is he going to be here, but he is your highest paid player in franchise history. Hopefully that changes. Hopefully that changes today. Hell, who knows? But I wonder if you should go, you know what? Let's make sure we've got our left defensive end in Demarcus Lawrence. We've got Randy Gregory at right defensive end. We'll figure out what we're going to do. We like Anai. We like Dorrance Armstrong. Maybe we can add another defensive end in this draft. I just think maybe that's the way to go than trying to do this whole thing that they talked about, multiple and fitting players into a scheme. Mm-hmm. And that sounds so hypocritical after years of going, well, they're not going to get turnovers, and every team in the world knows what defense they're going to run. And I'm like, hey, man, Rod Marinelli, you want to come back? That's insane. That's insane, I know. But build it around Tank. That might be the best thing to do.
You're getting riled up. I love it, though. Let's go ahead and step aside and take our first break here on the DallasCowboys.com Draft Show. When we come back, it's time for some Twitter on the 20. We'll answer your fan questions. We got a ton of them over the last week, so this will be a ton of fun when we come back here on the Draft Show.
There's nothing as unique as our eyes, which is why Essilor pioneers ways to make lenses as unique as you. Verilux for super sharp vision, Essential Blue for protection, and Crizal for freedom from glare. 3 cutting-edge solutions in a single unique lens. So whatever your needs, insist on Essilor. Visit your local Essilor experts and find the perfect lens for you. See more, do more, Essilor.
Since 1865, Stetson hats are American-made with pride right here in Texas. And Stetson is proud to be on the field with America's team. Want to show your Texas and team pride too? You can. By purchasing your own Stetson, you can look just like how the flag guys do on field at every home game. Stetson hats, the official crown of all self-respecting Cowboys, and your favorite football team.
Get yours today at shop.dallascowboys.com or at stetson.com.
I'm Jay Novacek, former tight end for the Dallas Cowboys. Back in the day, I was the guy who always got the tough yards, and that's why I run with John Deere today. In fact, I have a John Deere 3025E tractor that can handle any yard work I need to do, even the tough yards way out back. So if you have 1 acre or 1,000, John Deere has the equipment that's just right for you. Visit a John Deere dealer today and run with us. We are the official tractor provider of your Dallas Cowboys.
Dear, it's 1908. Don't you think we should get electricity?
And stop using candles to see at night.
It's just electricity lights up the room fast. It's more reliable than candles blowing out, and people seem to love it nationwide.
Well, candles are...
Dear, did you just run into the wall?
Nope. May I have a new candle, please?
Historically, switching to new technology is a no-brainer. Today, it's AT&T 5G. Fast, reliable, secure, and nationwide. Switch to AT&T 5G. It's not complicated. 5G requires compatible plan. May not be in your area. See att.com/5G for you for details.
This is the DallasCowboys.com Draft Show.
On to the second segment here of the DallasCowboys.com Draft Show. Thanks for everybody tuning in coast to coast and around the world on DallasCowboys.com. Kyle Yeomans, Dane Brugler, Kevin Turner, David Hellman, and it's time now for some Twitter on the 20.
Twitter on the 20.
Chris Beam, as always, doing fantastic work with the drops in the back. Now, Dave, I know in the first segment you told me to forget about Kyle Pitts. Well, I can't do that. So I'm gonna throw this out there because got a text from, or actually a DM from Preston Dabbs today, early this morning, and I thought it was a fantastic question. He said, for argument's sake, does Kyle Pitts get this team back to dominating in the red zone should they pick him at the 10th overall selection? Because we've talked about the athleticism. We've talked about how good of a player and how generational of a player he could be, but offensively, you're not looking for prospects. You want a defensive prospect there, ideally. However, Is that a need because of the struggles in the red zone, David?
You know, it's a bummer because, anybody that follows my work knows that I'm captain of the Blake Jarwin pain train. And I would have loved to have seen what the red zone offense looked like with him in the lineup. Because I thought he could have been a high-volume guy down there. I think a guy as athletic and awesome as Kyle Pitts would obviously help you. But I wonder, and Dane, you can help me figure this out. I think Kyle Pitts he's improved as a blocker. Like, he can do blocker things, but that's obviously not why you're drafting him. But the Cowboys, I don't want to get out of 11 personnel. I've got 3 great wide receivers. So if Kyle Pitts is going to play here, it's going to be on the line, even if it's not to block. I don't know how much they're going to flex him out. And I wonder, would that be hampering his ability? Like, if the Cowboys played him that way, would he still be successful if he can't, flex off the line?
Yeah, I think he'd still be successful, but are you putting a cap on just how successful he could be? Probably, because part of the appeal of Kyle Pitts is that he can line up inline, detached, out wide. You're looking to exploit weaknesses in the defense with what Kyle Pitts offers. And if you're lining him up in the same spot, down in, down out, not creating any type of mystery there for the defense about what you're doing with them, then you're kind of, I think you're putting a cap on just what makes him so unique and so rare. Pitts, it's a really fascinating conversation with him because he's one of the top 5 talents in this class. I feel confident saying that. But will he be a top 5 pick? Probably not. Will he be a top 10 pick? Maybe not. It's hard to find, the exact right landing spot for him because he's so different. He's so unique. A lot of teams aren't going to be necessarily on board with that. So, the Cowboys, there's a good chance they could have a shot at him at 10. Would they really do that? It would be a pivot from what we have come to expect from this organization. So it would be a surprise, but I don't think you can completely rule it out.
And to answer the question though, what gets you back to dominating in the red zone? It's Dak Prescott. I'm gonna roll my dice is that the red zone offense is going to be pretty good if Dak doesn't get hurt last year. That's just where I'm at.
Well, one last thing on Kyle Pitts. If you want to figure out how to use him, just watch the Raiders offense. Watch how Darren Waller is used. And that's how you use Kyle Pitts. And, it's not that hard to, we shouldn't overthink it. Just watch how the Raiders use Darren Waller, use Kyle Pitts the same way, and you got a Pro Bowler on your hands.
I like that idea. I'm sold. Let's pick him at 10 and figure out from there. No, I'm just kidding. That's not an official.
I will say, and Dane, obviously, I think you're right, and I hope I'm not talking out of my butt here, but the Raiders, John Gruden is famous for using, he uses 12 personnel a lot. He is right. Not an 11 personnel kind of guy, and that goes back to my point is, I would love it if they drafted Kyle Pitts. That would excite me. But at the same time, if CD, Amari, and Michael Gallup are all on this team, and you have a guy like Kyle Pitts, and you have Blake Jarwin coming off his ACL, and Dalton Schultz had a nice season as well, that's a lot of mouths to feed for a team that likes to run 11 personnel. It's something that would definitely concern me, but I would call it a good problem to have.
And also a team that has a $90 million running back sitting in the backfield, should he be on the roster in 2021 as well. So, there's multiple mouths to feed whenever it talks to the offense. And we already had that conversation after CeeDee Lamb was selected. We had already talked about it. And if you're adding another man to the mix, that would potentially be something that it would be tough for an offense to deal with, even though you want as many talented guys as you potentially could on that squad. Okay, so Justin Warner ask, what position in this year's draft has the best talent and best depth, much like the wide receiver position last year, Dane?
I think wide receiver again is another one where it's kind of funny how similar it is to last year, where last year we had we talked about the big three with Ruggs and Judy and Lamb, and we weren't sure what order they were going to go in. It's kind of similar this year with Jamar Chase and Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle. You could make a case for any one of those three to be the first wide receiver off the board. And it doesn't stop there. I can't wait to see Chris Olave in the national championship game going up against those Alabama corners. Kadarius Toney, anybody that watches SEC football and watches Florida, they know about Kadarius Toney, how special of an athlete he is. The wide receiver position is stacked once again. And then, we talked about corner and edge rusher in the first segment. Both those positions are, this is not a great year to, if you want that elite player at the top, but there's good value in, the mid-first, kind of right where the Cowboys are going to be picking. There's good value in the second and the third at corner and edge rusher. So I think those three positions really stand out more than others. And then one other one I would say was tackle. And that's a good thing for a team like the Cowboys, who could look at tackle in the first round, but they could also wait to the second or third round and get a developmental guy that they could realistically turn into a future starter.
I think about past third round picks. When we've talked about Malik Collins or Neville Gallimore, I think there's a few defensive tackle names that might be of interest for them at 75, but I still think you got to think about what are you doing defensively.
What's the scheme?
What's the scheme?
Right.
What are you doing? And I don't know that. And I think they've proven, at least the people doing the drafting, and I know the head coach has changed. They've proven they're not going to invest heavy on a nose, and that could change. A nose or a one technique, a 325-pound mauler, they're probably not going to do that. But another thing that they've also done over the past, and I think about Chaz Green, and I think of Conor McGregor, a third-round offensive tackle too. And that's where I think the tackles are a position to keep an eye on at pick 75. Tackles on both sides of the football. Because I think the more you look at these offensive tackles, like Dane said, you find guys who are probably going to be there just because a lot of guys are going to get drafted at tackle, but I think you can kind of see, okay, there might be a good third-round guy or late second-round, third-round guy that I like. And I also think the defensive tackle, there's some guys I like that you might have to go get at pick 44. Washington tackle Levi Onwuzurike. I want to make sure I get close to getting his name right. Now, I like him more than. Let's talk about some of the guys we were talking about last year who might be there at pick 51. We were talking about Justin Madubuike from Texas A&M. I like Onwuzurike's name quite a bit more than that. Jay Tufele of USC is a powerful player who can, he would play the one technique if you were running a 4-3 here. I mean, that would be his position. Maybe he slips into the third round, and maybe that's a guy who would be of interest. And I like the idea of that, but you just got to learn a little bit more about what the heck this team plans to do on defense next year. And I hope those decisions are being made. I hope they're having meetings right now and getting close to making decisions, because other teams are making these decisions, and they're going to be picking their defensive coordinators, they're going to be knowing what they're doing. And the faster you get on it, I think the better.
Haven't been to that point yet. And Scott Fitz and our guy Allen both asked about was some of the names at defensive tackle. So, KT, I'm glad you kind of went through that a little bit. Now, Jason Davis asked on Twitter, and he said, what quarterbacks later in the draft have the potential to be a future starter? Now, I kind of want to preface this by saying, of course, this goes away from the Cowboys a little bit, but does it really? Because there's still an opportunity to draft a late-round quarterback, Dane. I know we talked about Ben DiNucci last year, but we saw what Ben DiNucci brought to the table in a tough situation against Philadelphia in Week 8. However, there's, I think, still a chance that you pick a quarterback. Is there anybody that sticks out to you that could potentially be a starter somewhere down the road?
A guy that I really like, and it's hard to figure out exactly where he's going to get drafted right now, but Davis Mills from Stanford, who is a former five-star guy who just never quite lived up to it at Stanford, but the traits are there. And so give me the guy with the traits, and let's try and figure him out and see what we have. So I don't know where he's going to be drafted. It's probably somewhere on day 3 is my guess, but all I know is I really like the raw talent, and I would love to bring him into my quarterback room and try and develop him.
I just want to add in that quarterback is my least favorite position to watch. So I really hope they get a deal done with Dak. And I would just like to just push back. I like doing quarterbacks last, if at all possible. Couldn't really do that this year with the 4 guys and having a top 10 pick. But, man, I really love doing quarterbacks in February and March and pushing it back as far as possible. So sign Dak. It's the right thing to do.
I just want to throw in, like, and I mean, we're going to talk about every position at every level of the draft, but, like, kind of an unfair question, isn't it? Like, how many starting quarterbacks in the NFL were found outside the top 35? It's like Dak, Russell Wilson, and Gardner Minshew, and Gardner Minshew's not even the long-term answer. So I don't.
Yeah, and Tom Brady.
I'm sorry. Only the best of all time. You're right. My bad.
Yeah, that was okay, I guess.
I mean,
no, you are right. You are right. It is rare to find.
If teams knew these guys were going to be that caliber, they wouldn't last to the point that they do. I will say, I feel it in my bones. I don't know if he'll ever be a starter. Like, I don't know if he'll ever be somebody's franchise quarterback. But Ian Book just strikes me as the type of guy who's going to kick around the NFL for a long time as like a backup, like a Mason Rudolph type that's like, maybe you're not excited if he ever has to start for you, but he'll be somebody's backup for a long time. He just strikes me as that kind of guy.
I feel that way about Sam Ehlinger.
See, I don't feel that way about Ehlinger at all. I'm not convinced he can play quarterback at the next level.
See, I think he could. Well, and the fun thing about this is both of those guys are going to be at the Senior Bowl. There's 6 accepted quarterback invites at the Senior Bowl. Felipe Franks from Arkansas, Ian Book from Notre Dame, Sam Ehlinger from Texas A&M's Kellen Mond, who I'm excited to kind of scout a little bit more up close. Jamie Newman, who was a Georgia transfer to Wake Forest, and he opted out of the 2020 season. And then Kyle Trask, who, of course, was a Heisman finalist. Those are the 6 quarterbacks.
Real quick, Dane, what do you think about Trask? Because I thought it was crazy that people were trying to peg him as a first-round pick. I know he had a great season, but like I never, even before Florida started losing, I never thought he was like a Heisman caliber quarterback. But if you draft him in the 3rd or I don't know, maybe the 4th round, like you probably feel pretty good about that, right?
He is a Mason Rudolph clone to me. I think he is Mason Rudolph. He is a sturdy, well-built passer who has a good arm, not an elite arm, a good arm. But there's a lot of his average mobility is something I really worry about. His accuracy is okay, but it can't be described as pinpoint. If he doesn't use proper mechanics, his ball just loses life and just drags. So I think Kyle Trask is a well-built, a smart, tough competitor. He has natural touch as a passer, but the inconsistent mechanics, the below-average mobility, that just puts a cap on his ceiling as an NFL passer. So I see a Mason Rudolph, and that's meant to be both a good and bad thing.
So now we've got out of everything we've talked about today, we do know for certain we're 50% chance from the Senior Bowl quarterbacks of finding Mason Rudolph. Thank goodness we've got 3 guys that could potentially get to that point and find a Mason Rudolph. Now, KT, I've got a question for you. This comes from J.R. Young, and he asked, what is the number 1 position of need for the Cowboys? And I know you kind of talked about the run defense, and we talked about corner and stuff, but if you had to pinpoint it, number 1 on the board, which would it be for the Cowboys going into this offseason?
I think you have to cover. You have to cover. So cornerback would be where I'm at. If Anthony Brown can be my cornerback 4 next year, I'm happy. That's what I want, So cornerback, I know people have been, wanting safety forever. I want to add to safety as well. But, I think defensive tackle, you look at yourself and you go, is Tristan Hill as a starting defensive tackle for me next year? And then who? Antoine Woods? We do that again? Yeah. Great guy. Want him on my roster. Do I want my starters to be Antoine Woods and Tristan Hill? In a free agency, maybe there's talk of maybe they bring back Gerald McCoy if they can. But defensive tackle is a problem. This team has shown they can't stop the run. It's quarterback and defensive tackle for me, and it's very clear. And you know what? I'll put linebacker at 3 there if they do what they probably should do. Post June 1, cut Jalen Smith and kind of start over there as well. Being a building block around Leighton Vander Esch. So, cornerback and DT, man.
I like it. I think that's where the Cowboys need to start. Dave, do you agree?
I think it's cornerback, and then you fill in the rest however you want, honestly. And that, I mean, again, this conversation will change because even though the Cowboys don't love to spend in free agency, they're still, I mean, they're going to, they add free agents every year. They will this year too. I don't feel like I'm in love with my options at safety. Maybe I just haven't dug into that position enough yet. But they need at least one starting caliber cornerback out of this draft class, in my opinion. Which is if I had to guess right now, I just think it makes way too much sense for that number 10 overall pick to be one of those cornerbacks.
Agreed.
So yeah, no, I agree. And then you can fill in the rest however you want. I agree with everything KT said. It just depends on how they want to play it. Like, will Jalen Smith be part of their plans? I have no idea.
Yeah. Is it crazy on my side to think that defensive tackle is more of a specific need? I'm not saying draft one at 10. I think corner has to be the pick at 10, or at least somebody that's going to be a starter, game changer type of talent. And I don't think there's a defensive tackle at 10 that could do that. But just in the fact of the run game, I mean, the corners weren't the fact that you couldn't stop the run. It was your defensive tackles and it was your linebackers. So for some reason, I put in terms of needs and just based on the Cowboys, not even looking at the draft class, I would put defensive tackle just slightly above corner. Because I think, like KT said earlier, you feel good about Trayvon Diggs. You feel good about Anthony Brown being a guy that you could bring back and be a starter. But is it crazy for me to put defensive tackle in front of corner, even though I know corner's probably the more likely and more logical first-round pick?
I don't think it's crazy. I think the answer to the question is defense.
Yeah,
that's true.
I think I could make a really strong argument for every single position on defense. I think that there is not a clear-cut answer here. I mean, I agree with you. You could make a case that it's defensive tackle, but I think I could also make a really strong case as linebacker. And there's so many, and that's why I don't think fans should be too upset about which direction they go here, because they need help everywhere, and it's not just a plug and play and okay, now we're going to be a top 10 defense. They need help everywhere, and maybe free agency will kind of tip their hand a little bit.
I like it. I mean, we're going to fix this team by the time we're done with this draft show. We're going to find a way to win some games with the defense by the time we're done. We're gonna set the roadmap for the front office to get the job done in April. But when we come back, the roadmap in terms of the college football season comes to a close coming up this week as the national championship between Alabama and Ohio State is on the docket. We're going to preview the draft prospects in that game and maybe have some question marks about these bowl games when we return here on the DallasCowboys.com Draft Show.
We're back with a tasty treat that's sweeping airwaves and taste buds. It's new Dr. Pepper and Cream Soda. Let's take a listen.
Dr. Pepper and Cream Soda's here. A new combo that's music to my ears, okay. Let's play. Cream Soda and Dr. Pepper time. Pour it in a glass of ice.
Ah, music to my ears and mouth. New Dr. Pepper and Cream Soda.
A delicious duet.
There's nothing as unique as our eyes, which is why Essilor pioneers ways to make lenses as unique as you. Verilux for super sharp vision, Essential Blue for protection, and Crizal for freedom from glare. 3 cutting-edge solutions in a single unique lens. So whatever your needs, insist on Essilor. Visit your local Essilor experts and find the perfect lens for you. See more, do more, Essilor.
The Cowboys way, where 16 Hall of Famers and 5 championships shows us what success looks like. Where turkey is always the second best part of Thanksgiving Day. Where we are all defined by one single thing, the star. Where we as fans know it's our job to keep the tradition going. Bank of America is proud to be the official bank of the Dallas Cowboys and to support the quest of living life the Cowboys way. Copyright 2020, Bank of America Corporation.
Dear, it's 1908. Don't you think we should get electricity?
And stop using candles to see at night.
It's just electricity lights up the room fast. It's more reliable than candles blowing out, and people seem to love it nationwide.
Well, candles are...
Dear, did you just run into the wall?
Nope. May I have a new candle, please?
Historically, switching to new technology is a no-brainer. Today, it's AT&T 5G. Fast, reliable, secure, and nationwide. Switch to AT&T 5G. It's not complicated. 5G requires compatible plan. May not be in your area. See att.com/5G for you for details.
This is the DallasCowboys.com Draft Show.
Segment here of the DallasCowboys.com Draft Show. Glad you're with us. Kyle Yeomans, Dane Brugler, David Hellman, and we've got Kevin KT Turner rocking it from the studios. I don't even know if I'm allowed to say the studios in which you're at, but it's your office and it looks really nice. I like it back there. iHeartRadio, I'll say it anyways. Who cares? The iHeartRadio studios. Now, we do have a championship game to preview, gentlemen, and I think this is exciting, one, because I think it's going to be a pretty darn good game, and secondly, there are a lot of draft prospects that people are going to get a first-hand opportunity to watch and do it up against great competition. And if we look back, let's just look at last year, specifically with LSU and Clemson. I know that's good memories for our friend Mr. David Hellman over here because of LSU's season here in 2020, not to bring bad memories into the fray here. But, you know, there was like 21 drafted players or something. It was like a crazy number of drafted players, a lot of them. Some legitimate players in this upcoming championship game that the Cowboys could find a way to do later on, Dane.
Yeah, here, Dave, let me ask you a question. How many, over the last 5 years, how many draft picks do you think Alabama and Ohio State have combined to produce? What would be your guess?
God. Just total? Total?
Yeah, a lot. Between just those two programs, the last 5 years, what would you guess?
So they're probably averaging like 6 per program, averaging 6 per program over 5 years. So I mean probably about 65 if I had to guess.
You're saying first rounders?
No, just total draft picks.
110.
93.
Wow. Holy crap!
So,
oh my gosh,
sold the hell out of that. Okay.
It's by far the two most or the two programs that have produced the most. LSU, by the way, number 3. So it's going to be the same on Monday night. It's going to be, we don't know what the draft process is going to look like. So for a lot of these guys, the combine, it starts Monday night. It's time to show what's going to, and all NFL eyes are going to be glued on this game. For say Chris Olave, how are you going to match up against Patrick Surtain or Josh Jobe? If you're Wyatt Davis or Josh Myers, Ohio State right guard and center, how are you going to match up against Christian Barmore? And Christian Barmore is a chance to really help himself in this game. We've seen it in the past from these Alabama defensive tackles. Marcel Darius, Deron Payne, these guys have emerged from the playoffs as legit top 15 type of, we knew they were talented, but they really emerged as top half of round 1 guys. Christian Barmore could do the same thing. This draft is just dying for a defensive tackle to say, hey, take me in the top 20. Barmore could be that guy this year with another strong performance. He's really heating up. So, I mean, we could go on and on about all the players in this game because it's never ending. For me, though, Justin Fields, I cannot wait to see how he performs after what he did against Clemson. The best game of his life. And it was so contrary to what we've seen earlier this year. When he faced tough defenses during the regular season, whether it was Indiana, Northwestern, even Michigan State gave him a little bit of trouble. He struggled a little bit in those games, but against Clemson, he was locked in. He was precise. The toughness. I don't know if I could use any words to really describe how tough he was in that game. How is he going to match up against an Alabama defense that is better than Clemson's? And knowing that, with all due respect to the Ohio State secondary, Alabama's going to put up points. And so it's going to be up to Justin Fields and that offense to continue to tack on and match point for point. The over-under is crazy on this game. It's like, what, in the mid-70s? So, they're expecting a lot of points, and I don't think they're wrong. I mean, it's like it's like a Big 12 type of line for the national title game against Alabama and Ohio State, which is just crazy. But there's no shortage of players in this game that scouts will be glued on. And I think Justin Fields, he's kind of leading that, but it doesn't stop there. I mean, Trey Sermon, with what he's done at running back the last few games, has been remarkable. Former Oklahoma transfer. On the Alabama side, really eager to see what on the offensive line, Leatherwood and Deontay Brown. What can they do? Sean Wade, can he do anything? Ohio State corner, can he do anything to kind of keep his head above water as an outside corner against Devontae Smith and maybe Jalen Waddle? We'll see if he plays. So we can go on and on. There's just so many future NFL players on this big stage that NFL teams are going to be really, really interested to watch and see how they perform. Because let's be honest, body of work matters. But if you give an NFL scout truth serum, they'll tell you how they perform on the big stage. That carries a little bit more weight. And so it's really going to be important for these players to step up and show out when it matters the most.
And we talked, or you mentioned a second ago about Jalen Waddle and how he can potentially come back. The wide receiver from Alabama could play this week. And what would that do for his draft stock and Devontae Smith's draft stock? Because, I mean, Devontae Smith, whenever he's the featured piece, he, of course, went off and won a Heisman. But, I mean, some would argue that Jalen Waddle was the more impressive player, at least from an NFL prospect level early on. Is that something that potentially could see shift a little bit depending on how Waddle plays in the championship game?
I'd be surprised, just because if Waddle can even play, I think he'll be on a pitch count. We might only see him play 10, 15 snaps. So, I don't know that there's necessarily anything he can do in this game that's going to change your opinion based off of what we already know right now. I think it just really comes down to what you're looking for at the receiver position. If, Devontae Smith, he's, obviously extremely talented, but if you have concerns about that body holding up, that's, nothing Jalen Waddle can do is going to kind of change that or alter that. With Jalen Waddle, he's not as polished as Devontae Smith, but I think he's a little more polished than, say, Henry Ruggs last year, who was the first receiver drafted. So both these guys are studs, and I think are going to be future top 12 picks.
I think one thing that I'm really excited to watch, and Dan, you mentioned his name a minute ago, but I feel like we haven't talked about him much, and part of it is because he hasn't declared. Job, the cornerback from Alabama, on the other side of Surtain, like a big game, maybe he's like, okay, well, now I can just go ahead and declare, because when I watched him on tape, he is definitely a top 10 corner for me if he's going to be in the draft. What are your thoughts on Job? And he's number 28, by the way, for those watching the game on Monday night. What are your thoughts on Job?
Well, yeah, he's big, he's physical. He's not the type of athlete where he's just going to be able to quickly recover, if he's caught out of position. He's not that twitchy athlete, but he's big and he's physical, and he does a really nice job being disruptive. And so it's tough, because when you stack these corners, Job, yeah, he's right there in that mix, but he's in the same tier as, say, like an Elijah Molden or maybe a Greg Newsome or a Melifonwu. So yeah, this is a chance, because we know that Ohio State, Chris Olave, I think there's a lot to gain for him, but it doesn't stop there. They've got Garrett Wilson and a few other guys. So if Ohio State says we're just not going to throw at Surtain, we're going to throw at Josh Jobe, okay, well, that's going to be interesting to see if it's Olave or if it's Garrett Wilson. He's going to be tested. And so this is definitely a game that will affect where he is ultimately drafted if he decides to come out.
I just want to throw Dane mentioned him, but Christian Barmore jumped off the screen in the semifinal. And when you think, the caliber of offensive linemen that Notre Dame puts out, that means something to me for sure. So he He's definitely on my radar, and Dane set it up perfectly. There's not a Derek Brown or a Javon Kinlaw in this class, so if Christian Barmore can jump out, and I would love it if he's there at 44, but maybe he can even play better than that and go in the first round. And then I love a good trash talk, and Sean Wade put himself on the radar this morning because he said he wants all of Devontae Smith, and with all due with all due respect to him, I think he's living on his school's reputation a little bit more than his actual production. Yeah. So be careful what you wish for, buddy.
I don't give him credit for the confidence. I mean, as a corner, you got to play confident. You got to be confident, even when the season has not gone well, and there's been more negative than positive from Sean Wade this year. But I mean, Ohio State needs him to step up, and maybe he'll surprise us all. We'll see.
That would be interesting. But you talk about potentially having so many points and the over/under at 74.5, and I mean, there's so many different offensive talented players. But does that scare you a little bit on these defensive guys? I mean, on both sides, on Alabama side and on Ohio State side, the fact that there is going to be a ton of points, you are going to see both of these offense have at least some sort of success. Is that just a show that these offensive prospects are a little bit better than maybe the defensive ones?
Yeah, I mean, that's just where the game is at. I mean, we've seen more points scored this year in the NFL than ever before. It's just going to be the trend. So, it will be interesting, though, because we've seen Alabama's defense, see what Florida did against them in the SEC title game. Go back to the Ole Miss game, and they put up a ton of points against this Alabama defense. There's certainly talent, but it's not maybe the Alabama defense that we've seen over the years that Nick Saban has put together. It doesn't mean they're without talent. They have the talent, but as a unit, there's some question marks. I'm really eager to, and going back to Christian Barmore, he's only a redshirt sophomore, so he's still very young. He only has like 4 starts this year, but he leads the team in sacks with 7. He leads the team in forced fumbles with 3. He's heating up at the right moment, and he's going up against maybe the top 2 interior offensive linemen in this draft, with Wyatt Davis at right guard and Josh Myers at center. And so that's going to be a really interesting part of this, because part of, Justin Fields understandably got all the headlines after that Ohio State-Clemson game, but Ohio State won the trenches, and that was really kind of the difference in that game on both sides of the ball. Their defensive line tore up that Clemson offensive line, and they won't be able to necessarily do that to Alabama's offensive line, especially, or even with Landon Dickerson out there, center, who's outstanding. They'll be missing him, but even with him out, it still won't be that way. And then on the other side, that Alabama defense, that front 7, they'll give Ohio State's offensive line a little more trouble than Clemson did.
Barmore's tape, the second half of his tape of this year is a Whataburger. The first half of this season, Barmore's tape is your friend who can't cook's burger from the grill. So, it's first round tape on the back half. Dana, I do want you to talk about 2 guys. Alabama and Ohio State have 2 guys at linebacker, and that's a position we might be needing here. Dylan Moses, who had first-round ceiling last year and then blew out his knee and hasn't looked the same. And then Browning from Ohio State. Those are 2 guys Cowboys fans got to keep an eye on Monday night.
Definitely. And I would even throw Pete Werner in there, Ohio State linebacker, because he's so dang versatile that you can use him in so many different ways. He can play any of the linebacker positions. The coaches have said, because he's so smart and he's so athletic, that they can pile as much as they want on his tape or on his plate, and that shows on tape. So Pete Werner, I think, is in that discussion as well. But yeah, Barrett Browning, he's got all the traits. He always has. Texas kid. Who former 5-star. What's that?
Fort Worth kid. He went to Kennedy.
Yep, exactly. And so he's always had the talent. It's just kind of the mental part catching up. And he still needs to anticipate a little bit better, but he has gotten better and better every year. He can play man coverage. So watching him going up against Najee Harris, who we know is an excellent pass catcher out of the backfield, that will be an awesome matchup to watch. And then, with Dylan Moses, he, as a sophomore, he looked like a future top 10 pick, explosive athlete, just kept making plays. Then he had the knee injury, and this year he just has not looked the same, like KT said. And whether it's him struggling to hold or to hang with Kyle Pitts, which nobody really can, or if he's just taking wrong angles to the football. He is still in that top 50 discussion, but he just doesn't look like the same player. And so going up against Trey Sermon, who is putting together one of the best 3-4 game stretches we've seen at running back in a long time, and he's averaging 9.1 yards per carry the last 3 games. What can he do against Dylan Moses and that Alabama defensive front? That'll be another major storyline, not only for the outcome of this game, but also for NFL scouts.
So there's your homework assignment, ladies and gentlemen, is watch these linebackers in the national championship game. Number 32, Dylan Moses for Alabama, and then Baron Browning, number 5, the linebacker for Ohio State, who, like we said a moment ago, I also like his size going up against Najee Harris, Dan, because, 6'3", 240, he looks the part of a bruiser linebacker. And
he's long, too.
Yeah, he is. He's got some long arms, and I think he's got somebody, or he is somebody that could slow down Najee Harris and his size. I think that's going to be a fantastic matchup. But that's going to do it for us here on the Draft Show today. We will be back on Tuesday as Dave Hellman will rejoin Brian Broaddus and Bucky Brooks for that show, and then KT and Dane will be back with Jeff Kavanaugh on Thursday, pending changes last minute like we had this week. But we'll switch it around, and we'll have some of the best draft coverage you can find on the internet whenever it comes to the 2021 class. But for Dave Brugler, for David Hellman, for KT, and for Chris Beam back in the studios, I'm Kyle Yeoman saying so long. Thanks for joining us here on the Draft Show.